Commander Veltar stood before the massive viewing screen in the central command chamber of the Zephyrian flagship. The blue and green planet below them looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but Veltar felt nothing at the sight. Beauty was a useless concept, an evolutionary mistake that their species had corrected long ago. "Report status," Veltar commanded, their voice flat and emotionless like all Zephyrian speech. "Target planet designation: Human Colony Kepler 442b," responded data analyst Morek from their station. "Population: approximately 50,000 humans. Primary function: scientific research facility with agricultural support systems." Veltar nodded once. The humans have been spreading across this sector for the past decade, establishing what they call colonies. The Zephyrian Collective had watched them carefully, studying their behavior patterns and decision-making processes. What they found was deeply disturbing. "Display behavioral analysis data," Veltar ordered. The screen filled with charts and graphs showing human activity over the past 6 months. Red markers indicated what the Zephyrian computers classified as inefficient actions. There were thousands of them. "Observe," Veltar said to the other Zephyrian officers gathered around the command center. "Humans spend 23.7% of their productive time on activities, with zero measurable benefit. They gather in groups to consume food together, when individual consumption would be 40% more efficient. They waste resources on decorative objects that serve no practical purpose." The data continued scrolling. Humans helping each other with tasks they could complete faster alone. Humans stopping work to comfort others who were experiencing what they called sadness. Humans risking injury to save domestic animals that provided no economic value. Most concerning, Veltar continued, is their leader, Dr. Hyunwoo Kim. Observe his daily routine. The screen showed surveillance footage of a middle-aged human male moving through the colony. Instead of remaining in his command center optimizing productivity, Dr. Kim walked among the colonists. He stopped to speak with individuals about matters unrelated to work efficiency. He attended gatherings they called memorial services for deceased humans who could no longer contribute to colony's function. Yesterday, Dr. Kim spent 4 hours helping repair housing units damaged in a minor storm, reported Morek. His technical skills were not required for this task. Lower-ranked humans could have completed the work, yet he participated anyway, claiming it was important for something called morale. Several Zephyrian officers made small clicking sounds with their mouths, indicating confusion and disapproval. Such behavior was incomprehensible to their logical minds. Their entire social structure is built on these emotional reactions, Veltar explained. They make decisions based on feelings rather than optimal outcomes. They value individuals over the collective good. They experience what they call grief when other humans die, even when those deaths have no impact on their own survival probability. The viewing screen switched to show footage from the previous week. A young human female had died in an accident while maintaining atmospheric processing equipment. Her death was unfortunate, but had minimal impact on colony operations since 2 other humans possessed the same technical skills. The human response, however, defied all logical analysis. Instead of immediately replacing the deceased worker and continuing normal operations, the entire colony stopped functioning for 3 days. They held ceremonies. They spoke about the dead female's personal qualities that had nothing to do with work performance. Many humans were observed leaking water from their eyes and making distress sounds. Dr. Kim attended every single memorial gathering, Morek reported. He spoke about the deceased workers' courage and kindness. He embraced other humans who were experiencing emotional distress. He participated in their ritual of placing flowers on the burial site. Flowers, repeated senior tactician Zarvek. Decorative plant matter with no practical application. Precisely, Veltar agreed. This emotional behavior makes humans fundamentally weak. They cannot make optimal decisions because feelings interfere with logical processing. They waste resources on the dead who cannot benefit from such expenditure. They value abstract concepts like love and friendship over concrete advantages. The command chamber fell silent as the officers processed this information. For the Zephyrian Collective, such behavior was not just inefficient but dangerous. Their own species had evolved beyond emotion through careful genetic engineering and neural conditioning over thousands of years. They had eliminated love, grief, anger, and joy because these feelings led to poor decision-making. Conquest parameters are therefore simple. Veltar concluded, eliminate their emotional leadership structure. Without figures like Dr. Kim to provide what they call inspiration and comfort, human resistance will collapse immediately. They are too emotionally dependent on their leaders to function independently. Estimated time for complete subjugation? Asked Zarvek. 72 hours maximum. Veltar replied after consulting the tactical computers. Humans cannot maintain organized resistance without emotional motivation. Remove their beloved leaders, and they will surrender rather than endure the grief of continue fighting. The other Zephyrians nodded in agreement. Their calculations were perfect, their logic flawless. They had never encountered a species that grew stronger through suffering, that found courage in sorrow, that could turn the deepest pain into the most powerful weapon. They had never met human grief. Begin invasion preparations, Veltar commanded. This will be our most efficient conquest yet. The Zephyrian war machine began to move, confident in their complete misunderstanding of everything that made humans truly dangerous. The attack began at sunrise when most humans were still sleeping. Zephyrian ships appeared in the sky like dark clouds, their weapons charging with deadly precision. Commander Veltar watched from a flagship as targeting systems locked onto key locations across the human colony. Primary target confirmed. Reported Tactical Officer Kexare. Dr. Hyunwoo Kim, located in Residential Sector 7. Elimination probability, 99.4%. Execute, Veltar commanded. The energy beam struck with perfect accuracy. The small building where Dr. Kim lived vanished in a flash of light, taking the human leader with it. According to all Zephyrian calculations, this should have ended the battle before it truly began. Instead, something impossible happened. A young human female named Sojin ran toward the destroyed building, screaming words the Zephyrian translators could barely process. She fell to her knees in the smoking rubble, pulling debris away with her bare hands, even though the targeting computers confirmed no life signs remained. "Dr. Kim!" she cried out, her voice breaking in ways that made the Zephyrian audio system struggle to record properly. "Please, no, not him." Veltar expected her to flee when she realized the situation was hopeless. Human self-preservation instincts should have triggered immediate evacuation protocols. Instead, Sojin lifted her face to the sky, tears streaming down her cheeks, and screamed at the Zephyrian ships with raw fury. "You killed the best of us," she shouted. "He saved my little brother when the transport crashed. He worked 3 days without sleep to fix our water systems. He was going to officiate my wedding next month." Other humans began emerging from their shelters, and Veltar noticed their behavior patterns were completely wrong. Instead of scattering in logical survival formations, they gathered around Sojin and the destroyed building. Instead of calculating escape routes, they were embracing each other and making those strange water-leaking expressions. Tactical assessment, Veltar demanded. "Why are they not surrendering?" "Unknown," Kexare replied, confusion evident even in their emotionless voice. Human behavior is not matching predicted parameters. An older human male named Minho approached the wreckage. He placed his hand on Sojin's shoulder and spoke in a voice that carried across the settlement. "Dr. Kim always told us that kindness was strength." Minho said loudly enough for everyone to hear. He said that caring for others wasn't weakness, but the most important thing humans could do. If these aliens think killing him will break us, they don't understand what he taught us. Sojin wiped her tears and stood up. When she turned to face the other humans, her eyes held something that made Veltar's combat computers send error messages. It was not fear or despair. It was determination so fierce it seemed to burn like fire. "For Dr. Kim," she said simply. Those 3 words changed everything. The humans scattered, but not in retreat. Instead, they moved with purpose that defied Zephyrian tactical analysis. Research scientists grabbed tools and began converting laboratory equipment into weapons. Agricultural workers used their knowledge of the colony's layout to create ambush positions. Even the children helped by carrying supplies and messages between defensive points. "This is impossible," muttered data analyst Morak from the flagship. "They should be paralyzed by grief." Emotional trauma typically reduces combat effectiveness by 67%. But these humans weren't becoming weaker. Their grief was transforming into something the Zephyrians had never encountered. Minho held a corridor entrance against 6 Zephyrian warriors, wielding a plasma cutter like a sword while tears ran down his face. "He taught my daughter to read." Minho screamed as he fought. "He came to every birthday party, every graduation. You don't understand what you took from us." In the medical center, Dr. Eun-ji Lee was treating wounded humans while also coordinating defensive strategies. She had known Dr. Kim for 15 years, had watched him deliver babies and comfort the dying. Now she worked with surgical precision to save lives while making tactical decisions that baffled Zephyrian military algorithms. "South Corridor is compromised," reported a young man named Jae-min over the communication system. "But we've rigged the maintenance tunnels with explosive charges. These invaders want to take our home. They'll have to earn every meter." Jae-min was So-jin's younger brother, the same person Dr. Kim had saved years earlier. He fought not with trained military skill, but with desperate courage born from love and loss. The battle raged for hours. Every time the Zephyrians thought they had gained an advantage, the humans found new ways to resist. They used their scientific knowledge to create improvised weapons. They used their understanding of human nature to coordinate impossible rescue missions. They used their grief as fuel for a fire that burned brighter with every passing hour. By evening, Veltar stared at casualty reports that should not have existed. 40% of the landing force was destroyed or disabled. The human settlement still held key defensive positions. Most shocking of all, several Zephyrian soldiers had been captured alive, something that hadn't happened in over 2 centuries of conquest. Tactical retreat authorized. Veltar finally transmitted to all units. This requires further analysis. As the Zephyrian ships withdrew, So-jin stood in the ruins of Dr. Kim's home, holding a small flower he had been growing in a pot by his window. It had somehow survived the destruction. She planted in the ground where he died, her tears watering the soil. The aliens had learned something dangerous that day. They had discovered that human grief was not weakness. It was strength beyond all calculation. Junior Analyst Kethare lay on the medical bed, staring at the ceiling with confusion. The wound in their leg throbbed with pain, but that wasn't what troubled them most. What confused Kethare was why they were still alive. The human female treating their injury was named Eun-ji. She worked carefully, cleaning the wound and applying healing gel with gentle hands. This made no logical sense to Kethare. They were enemies. Keeping prisoners alive wasted valuable resources and created security risks. "Why do you repair my injury?" Kethare asked through the translation device. "My termination would benefit your tactical position." Eun-ji paused in her work and looked at them with eyes that seemed to hold sadness. "Because Dr. Kim taught us that every life has value. Even our enemies deserve medical care when they're hurt. This Dr. Kim," Kethare said slowly, "he was your deceased leader. How can instructions from a non-functional human influence current decisions?" Eun-ji's face changed in a way that Kethare's social analysis programs couldn't interpret. Water began forming in her eyes again, but she continued working. "He's not non-functional," she said quietly. "He's still with us in everything he taught us, in every person he helped, in every kindness he showed. That's what humans call living on through memory." Kethare processed this information, but found no logical framework to understand it. Dead beings could not influence living ones. Their data was permanently lost. Yet these humans continued acting as if their deceased leader was somehow still present. Over the following days, more humans came to visit the medical center. They brought food for Kethare, adjusted their bedding for comfort, and most strangely of all, they talked to them. Not interrogation or tactical questioning, but simple conversation. A young human male named Jae-min sat beside Kethare's bed one afternoon, his arm in a healing cast from the battle. "You want to know about Dr. Kim?" he asked. "I can tell you stories." Stories serve no productive function. Kethare replied automatically. Maybe not for you, Jae-min said with a small smile. But for us, stories keep people alive even after they die. Despite their programming, Kethare found themselves listening as Jae-min spoke. He described how Dr. Kim had pulled him from wreckage 5 years ago, working for hours to free a trapped child he barely knew. How the doctor had spent his own rest periods teaching children about science and art. How he had comforted families when loved ones died, sharing their grief even when it served no practical purpose. When my grandmother passed away last year, Dr. Kim sat with our family all night. Jae-min continued. He didn't say much, just stayed there so we wouldn't be alone with our sadness. He said grief was the price we pay for love, and both were worth experiencing. Kethare felt something strange happening in their neural pathways. Phantom sensations flickered through their consciousness, feelings that their genetic conditioning should have eliminated completely. When Jae-min showed them a photograph of Dr. Kim surrounded by smiling children, something unprecedented occurred. A drop of water fell from Kethare's eye. What is this malfunction? Kethare whispered, touching the moisture on their face with trembling fingers. Eunji, who had been working at a nearby station, approached with wonder in her expression. That's not a malfunction, she said softly. That's a tear. It means you're feeling sadness or empathy. Impossible, Kethare protested. Zephyrians do not experience emotional responses. We eliminated such weaknesses millennia ago. Maybe you didn't eliminate them, suggested an older human named Minho, who had entered the medical bay. Maybe you just buried them so deep you forgot they were there. Over the next several days, Kethare experienced more of these strange sensations. When they learned that So-jin's wedding had been postponed because Dr. Kim wouldn't be there to perform the ceremony, something ached in their chest. When they heard Minho describe teaching his daughter the same scientific principles Dr. Kim had shared with him, Kethare felt what could only be described as warmth. The most powerful moment came when the humans held what they called a memorial service. They gathered in the main common area, sharing stories about Dr. Kim and other colonists who had died in the attack. They sang songs that served no productive purpose. They lit candles that wasted energy. They cried together and embraced each other. Kethare watched from the medical bay window, unable to look away. When So-jin spoke about her memories of Dr. Kim's kindness, when she described how much she missed his guidance and friendship, Kethare felt their carefully constructed emotional barriers crumble completely. I understand now, Kethare whispered to Eunji, who sat beside them. You do not grieve because you are weak. You grieve because you love deeply. And that love, it makes you stronger, not weaker. Eunji nodded, tears in her own eyes. Dr. Kim used to say that grief was proof of connection. The deeper the grief, the more meaningful the relationship was. Kethare felt more water falling from their eyes, and for the first time in their life, they didn't try to stop it. We Zephyrians believed emotion was a flaw to be corrected. But you humans, you made it into strength. Not just strength. Minho added gently. Emotion is what makes life worth living. Joy, sadness, love, even grief, they're all part of being truly alive. That night, alone in the medical bay, Kethare experienced their first dream filled with feelings instead of calculations. They dreamed of Dr. Kim, a human they had never met, but now understood had been extraordinary. When they woke, Kethare knew their species had been wrong about everything, and somehow that realization felt like hope. The Zephyrian High Council gathered in their vast chamber of pure white walls and cold metal surfaces. 12 beings sat around a circular table, their faces showing no expression as they reviewed the combat reports from 17 different human colonies. Analysis complete, announced Senior Counselor Thexval in their flat, emotionless voice. Human resistance has increased by 412% across all contested systems. Our standard conquest protocols are failing. Council member Vorthak accessed the data files with mechanical precision. Impossible. Emotional species should become weaker when experiencing trauma and loss. Our psychological warfare models predict complete surrender within standard time parameters. The models are incorrect, replied Thexval. Observe battle footage from the Kepler 442b engagement. The chamber's central display showed recordings of humans fighting with impossible determination, scientists wielding makeshift weapons against trained Zephyrian warriors, children carrying supplies through dangerous combat zones, medical personnel treating wounded soldiers while under direct fire, their grief responses not functioning as predicted, noted Counselor Mextar. Instead of producing paralysis and surrender, human emotional pain appears to generate increased combat effectiveness and tactical cooperation. The Council processed this information in silence. For a species that had eliminated emotion and relied purely on logic, human behavior was completely incomprehensible. How could pain make someone stronger? How could sadness inspire courage? Secondary concern, continued Thexval. The emotional contamination is spreading to our own forces. Junior Analyst Kethare has shown significant behavioral abnormalities since their capture and release. They have been observed experiencing what medical scanners classify as empathy and compassion. This information sent ripples of concern through the council chamber. Emotional contamination was their species' greatest fear. Thousands of years of genetic engineering and neural conditioning could be undone by exposure to primitive feelings. Kethare's condition is worsening, reported medical supervisor Nexron. They have requested permission to visit captured human civilians. They speak frequently about concepts such as friendship and kindness. Most concerning, they have been observed leaking water from their optical organs in response to stories about deceased humans. Immediate quarantine, ordered Vorthak. We cannot allow this contamination to spread further. Too late, Thexval responded grimly. 17 other Zephyrian personnel are showing similar symptoms. All had direct contact with human prisoners. They speak of feeling something they call guilt about our military actions. The council fell silent as they processed the implications. Their perfect logical society was being infected by human emotions. The very foundations of Zephyrian civilization were under threat. Solution is obvious, declared Councilor Rexmar, the military strategist. Complete sterilization of all human settlements. Eliminate the source of contamination before it spreads further. Define parameters, requested Thexval. Orbital bombardment of all human colonies, Rexmar explained. No ground forces, no prisoner interaction. Eliminate 2.7 billion human lives from safe distance. Acceptable losses for preservation of Zephyrian purity. The other council members nodded in agreement. It was the most logical solution. Clean, efficient, and final. Authorization granted, Thexval announced. Execute immediately. The massive Zephyrian fleet moved into position above New Busan, the largest human colony world. 3 million humans lived on the planet's surface, including many refugees from other attack settlements. They had no defensive systems capable of stopping orbital weapons. Kethare stood at the viewing port of their transport ship, watching the preparations with growing horror. They had been returned to Zephyrian custody as part of a prisoner exchange, but something fundamental had changed inside them during their time with the humans. Bombardment commencing in 60 seconds, announced the ship's computer in its emotionless mechanical voice. Kethare pressed their hands against a viewing port, their newly awakened conscience screaming in protest. Below them, 3 million humans were going about their daily lives. Children were attending school. Families were eating meals together. Scientists like Dr. Kim were working to build better lives for their communities. In 30 seconds, they would all be dead. Stop, Kethare whispered. Then louder, stop this. Other Zephyrians on the bridge turned to stare at them with confusion. Emotional outbursts were unheard of in their society. Bombardment commencing, reported the computer. The first energy beams struck the planet's surface. Cities vanished in flashes of light. Hospitals where beings like Unji treated the sick and injured disappeared in microseconds. Schools where children learned and laughed were erased from existence. Kethare felt something break inside their mind as they watched the destruction. The pain was indescribable, worse than any physical injury. They understood now what the humans had tried to teach them about grief and loss. They loved each other, Kethare screamed, falling to their knees as tears poured down their face. They cared for strangers. They helped their enemies, and were murdering them for it. The emotional breakdown spread like wildfire through the Zephyrian fleet. Sub-Commander Raxtel collapsed at a station, overwhelmed by sudden understanding of what they were destroying. The medical facilities, he transmitted in anguish. We just killed thousands of healers who saved lives. Weapons Officer Zektra stopped targeting calculations mid-sequence. The memorial gardens, they whispered, where humans honored their dead with flowers. We turned them to ash. For the first time in millennia, Zephyrian unity shattered. Soldiers refused orders. Officers questioned commands. Entire ship crews experienced simultaneous emotional awakening as they realized the magnitude of what their logic had cost them. The bombardment stopped as chaos spread through the fleet. But it was too late for New Busan. 3 million human lives had been sacrificed to Zephyrian logic. And finally, tragically, the aliens began to understand the true price of a world without hearts. The war had been raging for 3 years when both sides finally stopped fighting. Not because anyone won, but because there was almost nothing left to fight for. Entire star systems lay in ruins. Both humans and Zephyrians had lost millions of their people to a conflict that had spiraled far beyond anyone's control. Kethar stood in the command center of a damaged Zephyrian ship, looking at reports that made their heart ache with newly learned grief. Half of their fleet was gone. Worse, the emotional awakening that had begun with them was now spreading throughout Zephyrian society. Like wildfire, their perfect logical civilization was crumbling as more and more of their people learned to feel. Incoming transmission on emergency frequency, announced their communications officer, Yexare, who had also been changed by exposure to human emotion. Source appears to be human. Accept the transmission, Kethar ordered, though they held little hope for peaceful contact. Too much pain had passed between their species. The viewing screen flickered to life, showing a young human woman with tired eyes and scars on her face. Kethar recognized her immediately. It was Sojin Park, the engineer who had knelt in the ruins of Dr. Kim's home 3 years ago. She looked older now, worn down by war and loss. I'm speaking to any Zephyrian forces who can hear this, Sojin said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. My name is Sojin Park. I was there when your people killed Dr. Kim. I was there when my home was destroyed. I have every reason to hate all of you. Kethar felt shame burn in their chest, another emotion they were still learning to understand. But I'm not calling to threaten you, Sojin continued. I'm calling because this war has to end. We're all dying, your people and mine. And I think some of you might finally understand why that matters. Several Zephyrian officers gathered around the screen. Many of them showed signs of emotional awakening, the subtle facial expressions, the capacity for concern that their species had thought lost forever. What do you propose? Kethar asked, activating the return transmission. Sojin's image focused on them with recognition. You're the one who was captured on Kepler, 442b. Kethar, Unji told me about you before New Busan was destroyed. The mention of New Busan brought visible pain to Sojin's face, and Kethar felt that pain echo in their own heart. I am sorry, Kethar said, the words carrying weight they had never possessed before. We were wrong. About everything. I know, Sojin replied simply. But being sorry isn't enough anymore. We need to do something before we destroy each other completely. The meeting took place on a small asteroid that neither side claimed, far from any inhabited worlds. Sojin arrived with a small group of human survivors, including Minho, who had aged considerably since Kethar had last seen him. Kethar brought several Zephyrian officers who had undergone emotional awakening. They sat in a circle inside a simple shelter, the artificial gravity making it feel almost normal despite the strange circumstances. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Dr. Kim used to say that understanding begins with listening. Sojin finally said, So, I want to listen to you. Help me understand how your people could do what they did. Kethar struggled with words that seemed inadequate. We thought emotion was weakness. We believed logic was perfection. When we saw humans crying, showing love, experiencing grief, we saw it as a flaw to be corrected. But you understand now? Asked Minho. Yes, replied Elder Vorthak, who had joined their group after experiencing his own emotional breakdown during the New Busan bombardment. We understand that we eliminated the very thing that makes existence meaningful. We became perfectly logical but completely empty. Over the following hours, both sides shared their stories. Humans spoke of the people they had lost, the communities that had been destroyed. Zephyrians described the hollow existence they had lived for millennia, the emptiness of a life without feeling. We made ourselves into machines, admitted Communications Officer YXRA. We thought it made us superior. Instead, it made us incapable of understanding what truly mattered. So Jean listened with the patience that Dr. Kim had taught her. "What matters?" she asked. "Connection," Kethare answered immediately. "Love. The bonds between individuals that make loss painful but life worthwhile. We destroyed that in ourselves, and then we tried to destroy it in you because we were afraid of what we had lost." The breakthrough came when Minho began cry while describing his daughter's death in the war. Instead of seeing it as weakness, the Zephyrians in the group felt his pain as their own. Vorthak placed a gentle hand on Minho's shoulder, offering comfort in a gesture that would have been impossible for his species just years earlier. "This is what we can teach each other." So Jean realized. "You can help us think more clearly, make better decisions with our emotions. We can help you learn to feel again, to understand what it means to truly live." The agreement they reached wasn't a treaty or surrender. It was a commitment to learn from each other. Zephyrians would help humans channel their powerful emotions through logical frameworks, while humans would guide Zephyrians in rediscovering their capacity for feeling. They decided to rebuild together, starting with Memorial Garden on the ruins of New Busan. Zephyrian engineering would create the perfect growing conditions, while human intuition would choose plants that bloomed in cycles of remembrance and hope. As they worked side by side, planting flowers in memory of Dr. Kim and all the others who had died, Kethare finally understood the lesson humans had been trying to teach all along. Grief wasn't the enemy of logic. Love wasn't the opposite of wisdom. Both were necessary parts of being truly alive. And sometimes, the deepest wounds could heal into the strongest bonds of all.